Hey there, welcome to Dirt Rich, seasonal conversations on food and farming. I'm Katie Feterl, the Communications Director for the Sustainable Farming Association. And I really want to say that it's spring and the weather is warming, but of course we're getting these April Minnesota snows. Regardless, Zachary Paige of North Circle Seeds is back on the show today to help us prepare for seed saving in our gardens and on our farms. Zachary and North Circle Seeds are up in Vergas, Minnesota, and he's also a member of the Lake Agassiz chapter of SFA and a board delegate. He's got some tips for planning ahead, he's going to walk us through some seed saving processes for a few different plants, and he's got some colorful stories too. Let's get to it. Hey Zach, welcome back to Dirt Rich.
How's it going, Katie?
Good. How are you doing?
Good to be here.
Thanks for returning. I'm just going to start right off with the big question why we're even having this episode. Why is it important to plan the layout of your garden or your plot for planting for seed saving?
Well, yeah, there's some considerations to take into account when you're planting for your garden for seed saving rather than just gardening. And one of the biggest factors is spacing. Like if you're planting lettuce, a good way to plant typically if you're just growing as a gardener or even as a farmer, you'll plant lettuce. I'll plant them as close as 8 inches apart or maybe even closer. So you're kind of like covering the weeds that way, the weed layer. But when you're saving seed, you'll want to make sure that you'll have enough space for the whole plant to grow out as it comes to physiological maturity. It's a big word of just the plant is going to expand in different ways when it's going to seed. So when a lettuce goes to seed, it grows up to like 3 feet tall, and these shoots come out and the flowers, and I guess it's what's called as bolting. So you want to be able to keep enough space in your garden for things like that. As a plant goes to seed, it might change its form. So spacing is a big consideration as one. Another thing to consider is trellising. So just like the lettuce, you'll want to trellis those flower stalks that come up because they could easily weigh down and fall to the ground, and that wouldn't be good for something like lettuce, which is a dry seed. You want to keep it dry. That's the way it stays most viable. So you'll at some point want to get some stakes and some rope and just kind of interweave them so they're just up. And we'll get into biennial flowers and seeds later on, but same thing with carrot. Carrot flower is really beautiful, one of the most beautiful flowers, I think. And it's the same exact plant as Queen Anne's lace. So if you've seen that, you'll actually want to chop it down because you don't want to have crossing. But yeah, so spacing's huge, trellising, and then a big consideration, of course, is where you get your seed from, your seed stock. You want to get it from a trusted source or somebody that you know has good seed saving practices and seed storage. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and if it does, it does. But you want to be able to kind of know if you're doing a lot of seed saving. You don't want to have half your garden not come up. So yeah, just choosing reputable sources for your seed, and then choosing open pollinated seed versus hybrid. I think we talked about that at the last podcast, so I won't get into that too much. But open pollinated seed is a type of seed that you could save seed that's going to be true to type year after year. So just making sure you get the right kind of seed, and then, seed that you know. On the back of a seed packet, it's typically going to say what that germination percent was for that year. So we do seed germination tests every year and provide that accurate number of a replicated 4 test of 100 seeds and average it. So it's a very accurate estimate of what's going to come up. So if you turn over that packet and there's a legal amount, which is usually around the 70 to 80%, which is kind of low. But if you see 87% versus 99%, then you kind of have an idea of like, maybe I should sow this a little bit thicker. So there's that consideration, which is just also just a good consideration for gardening. And another one is just choosing open pollinated, but also outcrossing varieties carefully. So there's about 4 or 5 cucurbits within the squash family that you actually can grow in seed save that won't cross with each other, which you might normally not think. Like a melon and a cucumber won't cross with each other. They're 2 different species, as well as a pumpkin and a winter squash. Pumpkin's Cucurbita pepo, which is one species of summer squash. Like you got your zucchinis and patty pans, and that's all Cucurbita pepo. And then you have your Cucurbita maxima, which is a winter squash, the blue hubbards, your acorns. So if you grow one per species, just one, they won't cross amongst themselves. So if you don't want unexpected crossing of pollination and mixing of traits, then just pick one of each of those species as well as any other outcrossing species, and then it'll stay true to type. On the other hand, if you want to have some fun and have some like red squash and then have some green squash and, try to create a red-green striped hybrid, something that tastes in between or amazing or new, and just get creative, then by all means, put all your open pollinated seeds together. And squash is a great one to have some fun with. So yeah, those are some ideas and considerations for planning for seed saving. And then I suppose if you want to start thinking really ahead, if you're a long-term planner, thinking about start to think about when you might be harvesting those crops, and then maybe preparing by purchasing any necessary materials. But you could do seed saving with a box fan and a bucket, and some water and some air and some, it's a 10,000-year-old tradition, so people don't need too much to get the seeds to dry down and get them clean.
That's excellent. I'd seen pictures, I guess, of North Circle Seeds equipment and seen some other things online that made it look like it might be really complex, but that's a great reminder that, like, hey, this isn't a new thing. People have been doing this since long before all of this equipment, so. Yeah,
it's only complex. I mean, it gets complex, or we make it complex because we're saving so much as a seed company. We're saving maybe 30, 40 different species. So we want to be able to do that efficiently and quickly, and we're doing a lot. So anything that could help make that more efficient is great. So we've got sets of seed screens, and we've got winnow wizard machines blowing the seeds at a very exact amount, so we can save the best quality and the heaviest seed, which is the most dense or probably the most vigorous seed. So we go above and beyond with trying to get equipment and things that work well, but it's still kind of on the cheaper side. If you think about like big ag where there's $1 million pieces of equipment, I mean, ours are in the hundreds or low thousands, so it's still a relatively you could do a lot with a little kind of thing, even where we're at, I think.
Well, okay, so we got spacing, we got trellising, we got, planning out which kind of seeds to use. Are there any other preparations that we can be doing at this point in the season to save seed for later? What are you focused on right now at North Circle Seeds?
So I just had an epiphany, like I don't need to grow every variety every year. If you have good seed storage. So I'm trying to up my seed storage game. So I've been chatting with a bunch of different seed companies because I'm a chatty person. So I just like to talk with people that have done it before, instead of reading. That's the way I don't know. That's just the way I learn. I just have conversations with people that have done it, and kind of have that mentor relationship. And then, hopefully like I'll have interns and people that are interested in learning from me eventually, and, pass that on. But, so what I've been learning though is just pretty simple. I kind of knew most of it is just keep seeds cool, dark, and dry, and relative humidity plus temperature should equal less than 100. That's seeds thrive in that environment, and they don't like a lot of fluctuation, especially in moisture, but also temperature. So to keep them in a constant environment is good, like a root cellar, but just make sure it's dry. So maybe with a dehumidifier. So I don't have anything like that right now, and what I'm planning on doing is getting a refrigerator. And people have been talking about these defrost cycles, because if it has a defrost cycle, it'll actually go up in temperature a little bit, a few degrees, because it has to heat up the sidewalls, even in a fridge. I thought maybe that was just for a freezer, but yeah, I stuck a thermometer in there, and I'm thinking maybe it's not so bad. It's only a few degrees, so I think I might be okay with it. But maybe some of them maybe watch out for and stick a thermometer in there. This place called Rototronics sells really great testing of the relative humidity in the air. A lot of the cheap, I think it's called a hygrometer. I might be saying it wrong, but some of the cheap hygrometers are up to 30% wrong. But the Rototronic one, it's $100, pretty penny, but it is assured up to only 3% one way or another. So that's really good, and we just went with that. And yeah, then we were really easily able to tell whether the temperature in Fahrenheit plus that humidity is less than 100, and if it is, we're all good. And I'll store the seeds in the fridge, and the moisture actually is pretty high. So what you can do is, in my case, what I'm going to do is make sure they're really dried down and pack them in a dry day, and also throw a few silica gel packets in and throw them in the fridge. And then it's not like a freezer, so you still don't want to disturb them too much, but you can take them out maybe every few months or maybe every year. So that's our plan, is to make sure the seeds store as long as possible. So then we could do grow outs of different things every second, third, and fourth year before we have to grow out those seeds again. And they'll still remain viable above 90%, 95% for at least 2 or 3 years. So that's one thing to consider, is like if you are like a crazy seed saver like me, or you do want to grow out a lot and try out a lot of different varieties, but also want to have your seeds viable, then maybe think about long-term storages or medium-term. But the other way to do it is just throw them in your closet, and just maybe check on them a little bit, but they'll do okay if they're just like in a dark place for the most part. Anyway, that didn't really answer the question too much. But that's what I'm considering right now. That's what's on my mind. But the other thing is just because we don't have to grow like 10 different or 20 different tomato species, then with the 4 or 5 that I'm growing, I could grow more of those, which is important to me because I want to be able to select the best of the best. And if I do have to grow 20 varieties, then it's like, am I really selecting if it's only like 30 or 40 plants? Like, I want to grow 200 of one species or 300 of one species, and then really super select and get the best yield, the most disease-free, and really be able to have high-performing seeds year to year and do really intense selections. And when I do grow those out again, then I'll have that super seed, the best seed that was in there for the next time. So that's something I'm considering too, is if you grow more of one thing, if you're attached to a certain type of tomato or something like that, and you want to be able to share seeds or share the best of those seeds, then you yourself could actually keep the best of the best and just give everybody else like the, still the best, but not quite that high. And then that way, then you'll have really high quality seeds that you could keep growing and sharing with other people too.
Okay, that is a big epiphany. It sounds like if you had, 20 that you're growing at the same time, the time it would take you to get to that super seed or even like a very high quality seed with the qualities you wanted,
Yeah.
it would take so long. This
Yeah,
sounds like a much
totally.
faster way to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the super seed idea. It's actually probably more efficient overall. But if you want a really super diverse garden, there's nothing wrong with that too. And just, a lot of CSA market gardeners love growing, and they have to grow all sorts of different types of varieties and things. And that's great too, because the benefit of that is then you get to taste a lot of different things and think, which one do I like the best? So it's kind of benefits of both.
Yeah, I really like how, I mean, just the, I guess, diversity of the ways that you can approach seed saving that you've described, today so far, and then in our last episode. It sounds like you could really enter this at any stage or for any reason, from just like doing a little home garden thing to, farming as a seed collective and everything in between and beyond.
Yeah, totally.
You can
Yeah.
dig in as much as you want, which I appreciate that.
Yeah, and some of these like self-pollinating species. So self-pollinating, you don't have to worry about the other plants surrounding it. Like it's not going to cross-pollinate. So tomato and beans and lettuce, these are all seeds that are easily saved, and you don't have to worry about the potential crossing either.
So I saw Nurse Circus Seeds in the news a few days ago. I think you were in the land.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in the tomato seed saving process that you described in there briefly. I think like it sounded, fun actually to me. And I think like 8-year-old Katie would also have had a lot of fun with that. And so, yeah, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about, the tomato seed saving process and then maybe how it is or isn't kid friendly, maybe other seeds are like a family activity to be saving.
Yeah, I think tomatoes for sure would definitely be a fun and it's like learning experiment. You get to see something rot, but then you get to see something rot that's like you're making it moldy for like on purpose, and it's a good thing. And it's smelly at first, but then it's cool because you're kind of dripping off all the moldy tomato guts. So, yeah, if you're doing it on a big scale, you harvest a bunch of tomatoes. You could select them like I do, and then the other thing about selection is, we could talk about tomato. Is it's not the tomato fruit that you're selecting so much as the plant. So, so if you find like the most amazing representative tomato of that variety, like if it's Wisconsin 55, it's like this perfect like baseball tomato. But the plant looks all like raggedy and diseased, and it's the only fruit on that plant that made it, then perhaps that's not the best one. It's something that's kind of tempting with corn. You'll find like the perfect cob or one of the best cobs, but then you look at the plant and it's like it's lodged and there's a little rust on it, and the plant is kind of it's just not the best physiological structure. It only has one cob instead of two. Maybe you're supposed to have two for that variety. And so that's a big consideration, is just look at the whole plant when you're seed saving as well. And how that plant is doing in the environment. But yeah, so you're saving your tomato. You selected them. You have them in your basket. And then you can throw them all into a bucket. And then Greg Reynolds taught me this, is like you get a big stick. There's actually big fun sticks at Menards, so this could be something of a family activity if you go to the the tool store. They actually sell like really big thick sticks that are like 3 feet long, that are like 2.5 inches wide. So they're just good smasher sticks. So you're just smashing the tomato. And I actually have a bunch of them because I don't want to mix my sticks with the different varieties, because then seeds might stick to one of them. So So yeah, you're smashing up your tomatoes in the bucket itself, and then you could add a little bit of water, and then you're basically waiting, and then that water will turn a little white with a little white mold, and then you pretty much know you're done. It'll take about 4 days in the summer, give or take. Could be like 3 or 5 or 6 depending on the weather. The hotter it is, the faster it goes. And then your water winnowing, you're basically winnowing out all the tomato parts will rise to the top, and the seeds are dense, so they'll fall to the bottom. So you could give it a good spin with the stick and add some more water and shoot some more water in there to get a little agitation, and then pour it out into your compost, but not pour it all out. Pour out like half, and then add more water, and then pour out half, and then keep going. And then eventually you're just like clean water and clean seeds. It's just magic. And then you could pour out the rest of the seeds into a screen, and then onto wax paper or something like that, parchment paper. And then with parchment paper, I put them in a dehydrator without the heat. And that way it doesn't kill the seeds. Seeds will die if they're like above 100 degrees. They are living, so you don't want to heat seeds to dry them. You just want to blow air on them. So once they're completely dry, and you kind of learn that by doing it, just looking at them, you can kind of tell if they're completely dry. I usually dry most seeds for 2 weeks straight, and then determine if they're dry or not after the 2 weeks. So if they need another week, then they need another week. And then I also try packaging seeds on a dry day itself. And then you never really want to like Ziploc seeds when it's like a humid day out, just because there's so much humidity in the air. And that's when you'll maybe want to throw a few silica gel packets in, just to be sure, because that'll suck out any extra moisture that might actually just be in that bag or be in that jar. But yeah, tomatoes is a fun one to save. And then I'd say the other really fun one is multicolored popcorn, or multicolored corn in general. We sell the Magnificent, and it's just like a Christmas present. When you unwrap the corn, you get to see the different colors, and they're all different each time. So that one could be a fun one with kids too.
Ah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think, I don't know, I'm just picturing your little like library of different tomato smashing sticks, and yeah, this just sounds like a blast.
Yeah, you could like name the sticks. You could be like, this one's smashy, and this one's
it's such a colorful process. This is really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, does the mold, is that serving a purpose in this process, or is it just like the time it takes for things to kind of separate out in your bucket? Or
it so when you squeeze a tomato into your hand, you'll never do that in real life, but if you do it in the imaginary podcast life, you would know that the seeds they're surrounded by this is like gelatinous, kind of goopy protective coating. Mm-hmm. So a tomato's warm and wet. It's all the things that a seed would want to germinate in. So that goop is actually the anti-germination goop. So you have to get rid of it in order to dry down the seed and have it usable for a seed. So basically it's just fermenting off that layer, and then it adds a beneficial bacteria to it. So it's kind of doing two things at once.
Nature's amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah. Some people think you have to do that with squash, but you don't. I've never done it. But you do have to do it with cucumbers also. So you have to do that same process with cucumber seed. Or you could just let them dry out, and that works too, but it doesn't get as clean of a result. They'll start sticking to each other, and it's just kind of more messy. So I'd recommend the fermentation way.
All right. Well, you've mentioned squash and tomatoes. Why don't you talk about some of like the more popular species to save, and maybe walk us through a couple so people can get an idea of how all the processes differ.
Yeah. I think probably the easiest seeds to save for a beginner and be exciting for like a new seed saver is something like arugula. It might come as a surprise. Like, that seems like kind of random. But arugula is super easy to grow. You literally just sprinkle it on the tilled soil and it grows really well. And then grow a lot of it so you can enjoy some of it. And then just let the other third or fourth go. Just don't even touch it really. And you'll see these really amazing stalks start to grow up. And if you plant it earlier in the spring, you really just don't need to do anything. You just watch it. And you do want to weed around it so there's not other bigger weeds in the way when you seed save. But then at the end of the season, around September, you just literally cut these stalks and put them into a bin and then step on them. And like have a little dance. And that's a little fun thing to do with your family too, is there's always dancing involved with seed saving. So the seeds are so small, they're not going to be crushed. They're too dense. So you could jump on them. And what that does is you're threshing the chaff from the seed, and the seed's out. And just like the tomato, the seeds are always dense, more dense than their parts around it, the chaff around it, or the pod, or the sticks, or the stalk. And they're always more lightweight too. So to clean it, you just run a box fan on a chair, and then you have your one bucket above and one bucket below, and just find the right speed so your seeds don't blow away too. Maybe start on low, and then you'll see that the chaff all blows away, and then the seeds will fall into the bucket below, and then you have clean seed. And you can keep running that process with the fan until it gets cleaner and cleaner. But I'd say like something like a dry seed is easier because you're not messing with water, you're not messing with time, you're just letting it dry down in the field itself. And I'd say squash is probably, I think squash is like one of those like survival foods. Like you could survive off just squash if you needed to. If you're thinking about this like zombie apocalypse, or just want to rely on your own garden for food, pick and find a squash that you really like. Maybe do that thing where you're growing a bunch of them just so you could test them all, and find one that you like. And then, because squash will store well just in your house, and then you're kind of seed saving as you go too. So it's not that it's a big ordeal, like you have to seed save all the squash seeds at once. You could have them all lined up in your house, and that's the place to store them, is 50 to 60 degrees or higher. And then you're just drying them down as you eat the squash every time. And you're just, after they're dried, you could throw them into a paper bag and have a special place for them, and just keep adding to that bag, and then you got your squash seeds for the next year. But you do want to dry them down. You want to have that time, just as like the tomato and everything else, like 2 weeks of airflow on them, and move them around. Don't put them in the oven to dry them if you want to plant them. And I guess one rule that I've learned is don't double layer the squash. So always keep just like one layer. Because if you double layer, even in a day or two, seriously, it will make mold. It's crazy how fast that happens. So the one way around it is just never double layer seeds that are drying, and move them around twice a day if you can.
Gosh, well, I have brought up, just kind of like, oh, is this something you can do with your kids or in your backyard and things? But are there considerations for people who are doing this at like a market gardener level or larger scale that they should be considering as well?
Yeah, I would say like just, pick out those self-pollinated plants that you like tomatoes. Some people say tomatoes cross with each other, and they do a little bit, but it's self-pollinating enough, unless you're really particular. But yeah, I'd pick out a few of those to do like your favorite ones, because then it's kind of like a marketing thing too. You'll probably save save money on seed sales is number one. Is sometimes seed sales are for even like a CSA farm could get up to a couple $1,000s. So if you're saving a couple $100, and seed sales of the price of seeds have gone up a lot in the last just 2 years because of COVID. And I've seen seeds, I mean, they're hybrid seeds and they're very particularly bred, but $70 for 20 seeds. I've seen that. I have never seen that ever. And I asked a few friends, like, is this a thing? Like, is this normal? Like, I've never seen that. So as seed sale prices go up, which they are already, just in the few years we've started, I thought $4 was high when I started, and a few people were like, yeah, it's on the higher end, but we're organic and we're selling regionally adapted seed, which is also 2 huge pluses, and we're using soil health practices. So we're like, okay, like, you'll maybe spend the extra $1 for good quality regionally adapted seed from communities in Minnesota. But now I've seen organic seed up to $5. So it's like, oh, we're on the lower end now. So it's just in like 2 years. So, but it's a good thing to get into because of that, you'll be, the more seed saving you do, if you're a farm, the more money you're saving. So it makes sense on that level alone. And then sometimes you'll see if you have a variety that you really like, once it's adapted to your micro region, your farm, you'll see higher yields and a reflection of just the action that you're doing, the relationship that you're growing with that seed. It'll kind of come back around where that seed will provide back for you. I like to think so. And then you could talk about it in that way too. It's like these seeds are we're growing on our farm, and you kind of have a story behind that. So you're kind of telling people about what you're doing, and it's not just about just buying in every year with inputs. It's like we're actually sustainable. We're actually sustaining ourselves in these ways, and if it's only a few species, or if it's only a few crops, like so be it. But you could play that up, right? You could say like this is this is the North Circle seed squash. Gosh darn it, and we love this darn thing, and we save it. We've been saving it for 50 years, or even 15 years sounds like a good accomplishment, and it is. So even those smaller stories, I think, are inspiring to people that are visiting your farm, or just at the market looking for something that's interesting. So I think telling that story is it could be a selling point.
I totally agree. I think we've seen so much, just even in the past year alone, of examples that people really are looking for those stories and that authenticity, and real examples of this is how I'm stewarding the land, rather than I don't know, people are more skeptical of greenwashing, and so sets you apart from that noise and offers some real examples.
Yeah, and one way to do that a friend of mine, Owen Taylor from True Love Seeds, does is they highlight and honor and showcase the ancestral history of all the people that grow seeds for him, which has inspired me to do some of that in a smaller way. That's his whole thing, so he's really embraced that. But it's empowering and energizing to grow food from we all have diverse backgrounds, and I think it's something that can be really authentic, to find that identity within each other, because we all have such interesting backgrounds of what are cultural foods and what were important to our grandparents and our great grandparents, and to try out some of those foods. Food's fun. Cultural food is fun. New food is fun. So it's just another fun way to interact with our past and our present, and to share one of the seeds that excited me is the ají dulce, and that's formed new relationships. Somebody reached out from Indiana and said, hey, like, I'm from Puerto Rico too, and we grow that seed, and it's actually a pretty hard seed to find, generally, the ají dulce pepper, and
Okay.
we found it on the USDA, which is like the last resort, which is, it's a good resource for breeders and people wanting to find rare things, open pollinated varieties. But those seeds didn't grow out too well. They were like too old. And we did find a few sources from Puerto Rico, but we weren't able to get those seeds because of seed laws, phytosanitary certificates and all that. But she was like, wow. I got seeds. We've been saving them for a while. Would you like some? Like, oh man, like that's such a nice gesture. And let's start trading seeds and talking about, what we can make with these ají peppers. And so, yeah, I made pasteles with them, with pork a few years ago. And I bought them with my granny, who's from Puerto Rico. Her mom was from there, and she was telling me about how her mom would always buy those peppers, and those were the peppers from Puerto Rico, and she remembered them. And so it's just it's fun to kind of bring it all back around and embrace the foods of our past, and eat well. And it's always fun to kind of show grandma too, like, hey, granny, look what I did. We grew the peppers, and then I was able to, kind of give her a few of those peppers back too. And so that's fun. And then,
oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
So that would be something that you could do this year different than last year to kind of keep things interesting, is grow something new from your and if you're like from, like, I've got like Jewish ancestry, and like we ate a lot of beets, like borscht soup, and like maybe that's not too exciting though, like just maybe find something else. But beets are really good, but just you could be choosy too and pick within your cultural background too as well.
Absolutely. I was gonna say, I know some pretty big beet fans out there, so that
I like
doesn't sound
beets.
boring
I guess
to me.
like I think if you're eating like borscht soup like every day for like years, then it would get not exciting. But there's a lot of fun things to do with beets.
All about context for sure.
Yeah.
Gosh, well, are we ready to shift to biennials?
Sure. Yeah.
When you had mentioned biennials, I think on the last episode, or maybe as we were preparing for it, I was really surprised at the process behind it, even just a sneak peek at that. So I'll just let you talk about it a bit and maybe use a species or two as an example.
Yeah, so carrots is a biennial that I started getting comfortable with pretty early on, because that was one that I started saving about 7 years ago with the early scarlet horn carrot. And with the carrot particularly, you harvest and you line them all up, all of them, when you have your big carrot harvest. And you could wait, and I think it's way better to wait as long as you possibly can, because then there's less storage time, which is huge. The carrots will get bigger, which is nice. They'll get sweeter, which is also nice. And the only minus is the potential damage, mice or other. So just be on the lookout for that stuff. But keep an eye out for any slugs. I even had slugs go through my carrots, and they ate all the tops off, and like the tops of the carrots, like freaking slugs, like really. And then that wasn't a good year. But you'll have, if you line up all your carrots, choose like the 30 best or the 50 best. Now for seed saving, I like to for a wide genetic pool of a cross-pollinated species, you do want something like over like 50. So I kind of go and double that just because I'm, want to be sure, but you'll be fine with 30 to 50, somewhere in there. But you don't want to just save like 1 or 2 because it's not enough. It's not enough for that population genetics to thrive year to year to year. It'll get inbred. So as a population, you need a certain amount. So maybe we'll say 30 as a minimum. So you save those top 30 carrots and choose the biggest ones. You could eat the rest. And you can cut the top off about a 1/2 inch from so there's like a green part, only a 1/2 inch now sticking up, or 1/2 inch to 1 inch. But you don't want to go too close because that's the growing point of the carrot. So you could get a paper bag from a grocery store, line it with wood chips about 3 inches, then line up your carrots on that bag, like 3 carrots or 4 carrots, just so they're not touching. You could go like head to toe, toe to head, and pour some more wood chips, do it again, pour some more wood chips, do it again. And then I sprinkle like a little bit of water in there, like maybe like a few cups, like 1 cup, 2 cup. The wood chips will soak up a lot of water. So maybe like a pint. Put a pint of water in that bag, and then put that bag, roll it up so it's closed, and then put that bag in a garbage bag, like a black garbage bag, and then poke a bunch of holes in that bag, and then close that bag up, and then put that bag into a fridge that's ideally like 34 degrees, but a normal fridge will do. And that's it. Then they're good. And check up on them, like maybe like a few months in, just make sure. But if they're in a fridge that's like 34 degrees, they're going to be completely fine. And then when you wake them up, right around now, April, or maybe a little later, because you want to just, when you get them out, you want to plant them. So you'll see that they're starting to sprout. So the top of the carrot is starting to grow, the flower stalk, which is a good sign. And then, you just bury your carrot just like it's planted again. And you have to do that in Minnesota. It just gets too cold. The carrots would turn to mush. It's not like garlic. It won't overwinter. I suppose if you had like 3 feet of mulch on top or something, maybe it's possible, but I wouldn't mess with it. If you take out the carrot the first year to grow it the second year, it's called a steckling, which is kind of a funny word.
I like
so we got these stecklings. We've got stecklings of carrots in the fridge. It's like, how nerdy can we get? Like, stecklings of carrots and kale and collards. So biennial by definition means takes 2 years to flower. So something like a kale plant will produce those mustard color flowers, those famous yellow flowers. And you'll get hundreds of flowers and thousands of seeds, and you'll have as much kale seeds as you'll ever need. And then, like something like beets and onions is a similar story, but they all kind of have their specific storage conditions that they like. Like onions, you don't want to get them too... Well, my onions actually did okay when they were below freezing. So, but just... you could just be careful that it's not getting too cold for any of these storage crops. Like a root cellar would do just fine.
Right, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, is that, all right, you need a second fridge, more than likely, or you just, don't eat refrigerated food for 9 months.
Like, I'm saving my stecklings, we don't eat food. Root storage would be fine. I've got the benefit of using walk-in fridges at other places, so yeah, it does sound like a good opportunity to make friends. Maybe this is where the seed collective kind of comes in, where you can share some equipment there and share some space. Yeah, definitely. And this is a project, actually, if anybody's out there, I'm thinking of and saves biennial seed or wants to. I'm thinking of a project to optimize biennial duckling storage space for the specific crops. So onions and beets and carrots, they all like a kind of a particular temperature. So one idea is like getting a walk-in and actually like heating it and from the inside. Because it's Minnesota, it's -30 out, -40 out sometimes, which is really bad. But if you have a little heater, then you could keep it at 33.
Oh, are you talking about like not even necessarily having the walk-in like plugged in, so to
Right,
speak?
yeah,
Like
just like
this thing wouldn't cool.
or just like throw a walk-in like onto the field.
Got it.
And I mean,
Wow.
maybe not that far out, closer to an electricity source, but the walk-in's just isolated outside. Or anything that's insulated that you want to just ruin with stecklings. But but yeah, this idea of like heating a space rather than having electricity cool it. So that's another idea.
Yeah. How can people reach out to you for if they're interested in that, if they have questions about any seed saving?
Yeah, feel free to reach out about beginning seed saving questions, anything. I'm trying to do as many educational workshops as possible. We've reached out to co-ops. I think Seward Co-op, we might be doing some Zoom seed saving 101s that'll be available after COVID, post-COVID, like outside masks or however it works. That'd be great to do on-farm demos, and I'm gonna try to do at least one a year at our farm and set up a space for that. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but maybe eventually we'll do like a multi-day event. But I would say at least once a year, one day a year, we could do a bunch of seed saving here in Vergas, Minnesota, just northwest, and kind of go through the whole process of saving a bunch of different varieties. But yeah, best way to reach us is Zachary at northcircleseeds.com. And that's our website. So you can find that contact info there, northcircleseeds.com. And yeah, we're like fairly active on Facebook. We got like a few pictures, but like if you like go back to last year's pictures, you could kind of get an idea of what we're up to and how things look with the different species that we have.
That is great. Lots of good resources there.
Yeah.
So to wrap up, just for fun, I'm thinking about how one of the end goals of seed saving is, culinary. Like we want to keep growing plants that have the right flavors or, desired flavors or textures. So in parting, I was wondering if you could just like tell us about a great meal that you had lately that was from saved seed in some aspect.
I think the most fun that I have is with all the hot peppers. And I could see through the seed sales that not everybody agrees with me because they're not selling that well. But I like hot peppers, so I don't care. So I just grow as many that I like. And my favorite is both the chile d'arable and the Catarina pepper. I think I just put those into like almost everything. The chile d'arable is like, I think it's just like the quintessential like hot red pepper. But it's got more flavor than what you'd buy at the store is like red pepper flakes.
Okay.
I think so. I think it's got like more of a smoky, distinct, interesting flavor.
Oh, cool.
And it's a little lighter. Like I feel like red pepper is like kind of like, it's more of like a musty, like darker hotness, but I feel like the chile d'arable is like kind of like more of like an airy, like light hot. And it still gets really hot. Like if you put a bunch of that, if you even put 3 of those peppers into something, it'll get a nice heat. So that's a nice plant that keeps on giving, because like if you dry down the peppers and you've got maybe 40 peppers per plant, and you grew 5 plants, it's like you're set for a year or 2 if you dry them down, because you might not only need 1 per meal. So that's one that I really enjoy. I think another one is the butternut squash soup. That's one of the bigger sellers, and that's just classic. If you make a good butternut squash soup, you could like make a bunch of it and freeze it, or give it to friends and family. So everybody likes butternut squash soup, I think. Oh, I've got one more favorite. I just remember, and that's a part of why I like garden, because a goal of mine for a while was to grow everything in gazpacho soup. And my granny would make the best gazpacho soup, and I've got the recipe if anybody wants it. But I'm not just gonna give it out. But if you ask for it, I'll give it out. But it's just like, it's literally like everything in the garden. So it's such like a nice thing to eat during the summer, because it's like, I did it. Like, I grew all those tomatoes and those cucumbers and peppers, and garlic goes into it. It's like, doesn't sound like it's like the most tasty thing to have in a cold soup, but it's so refreshing. And it's interesting. People either love it and are extremely addicted to it, like a few people that I've given it to. And then there's some people just like, oh my God, it's like garlic soup. That's disgusting. So it's like, you'll get these two different camps, and you're either in the garlic cold soup camp or you're not. But it's really refreshing, and I think it's a good one because there's so many garden vegetables that go into it. There's like 4 or 5. So
right, we have pizza gardens, salsa gardens.
Yeah,
it sounds like we can have a gazpacho
garden. And cucumbers. I should mention cucumbers, like the star of this. So it's not just garlic. I overdo the garlic, but it's mainly a cucumber tomato cold soup. So that sounds a little bit more refreshing, I think.
Wow. Gosh, well, this has been great. Plenty of good resources, some kind of like hunger going on after talking about all that food. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for being on Dirt Rich today.
Yeah, thank you.
Dirt Rich is produced by the Sustainable Farming Association. We believe that agriculture, done well, heals. For more resources or to tap into the Farmer to Farmer Network, visit us at sfa-mn.org.